Okay, today we're going to look at articles in Brighton Rock. It's a fantastic story, this book. I really enjoyed it when I read it about a year or two ago. And it's certainly a crime story. It's got an element of detective story in there as well. And it's all set in Brighton, which is a very similar city to my own town, because it's a seaside city. And that does mean that for a long time, a lot of our seaside cities have had quite a lot of problem with gangs and violence. And you can read about these problems in Brighton Rock. And these problems still go on even today in my town, where the police will close certain parts of town, or they don't close it, but they put a rule down that they can basically arrest or move people on for no reason at all in certain areas because there've been some kind of violent problems. Okay, so let's have a look at this, and we're going to pay particular attention to the articles. Hale knew before he had been in Brighton 3 hours that they meant to murder him. What a lovely start, eh? With his inky fingers and his bitter nails, his manner cynical and nervous, anybody could tell that he didn't belong to the early summer sun, the cool Whitsun wind off the sea, the holiday crowd. Okay, so he didn't belong to these elements of Brighton. He didn't belong to Brighton. He is clearly from somewhere else. Yeah, he's a stranger in town. They came in by train. Now, I'll quickly mention by train. Train is uncountable here, guys. And I want you to notice that when you have a noun which is often countable, but sometimes uncountable, the uncountable version of the noun is usually the idea of the noun rather than the specific object. Yeah, a specific train is a train, and you get on the train, certainly. But when you go somewhere by train, by car, by plane, by ferry, notice that you're really talking about the mode of transport rather than a specific object. And for that reason, it's more theoretical. It's more the idea of the train rather than an actual physical train. So they came in by train. I mean, the best way to learn this, guys, is just that when you use the by, train is used uncountably. And it often is with the word by. Have a look at the word accident. Accident can be countable. An accident, there was an accident on the motorway. But when you say, I did it by accident, accident is uncountable. And it's the idea of an accident rather than a specific car crash or something like that. So they came in by train from Victoria, from London, yeah, every 5 minutes, rocked down Queen's Road, standing on the tops of the little local trams. Now, you've got the noun of noun here, and notice this is a plural noun. I think when it's a plural noun, it's almost always the noun of noun. You can't say a noun of noun when it's plural, and so it's always the noun of, and we've got a the before the trams as well, and this is because we mean the Brighton trams, the trams in Brighton. It's very specific. Yeah, they were standing on the tops of the little local trams, and so this is the tourists that come to Brighton. They come and stand on the tops of the little local trams. Stepped off in bewildered multitudes into fresh and glittering air. The new silver paint sparkled on the piers. Now, there's nothing wrong here with saying a new silver paint sparkled on the piers. And all it does, it just changes it slightly, very, very slightly. It's a really subtle difference, and it barely makes a difference. But when you change it to an A, it sounds as though you're introducing this idea into the person's imagination for the first time. It sounds less specific, yeah, and there's very little difference. You know, it just sounds more like you're introducing this picture to the listener. A new silver paint sparkled on the piers just sounds more like you're introducing the listener or the reader. But we've got the new silver paint sparkled on the piers. The cream houses ran away into the west like. Now, it's when we hit this preposition, like, that we start to see the word a repeated many, many times. And this is not a coincidence. Yeah, when you suddenly make a comparison, you know, I don't know, my cat looks like a fluffy ball. Yeah, notice I say a fluffy ball, like. After the word like, you start to talk about imaginary things rather than real things. And I want you to associate the word a with the imagination. It's far closer to an imaginary thing when you say a, and the word the is far closer to a real thing. Yeah, and so when you're describing something hypothetical, or when you're describing a hypothetical future, for example, you very often see a. Yeah, the cream houses ran away into the west. Now, these are definite cream houses that exist in Brighton, and that's a definite direction, the west. But then we have this simile, you know, it's like a metaphor, but it uses the word like. It's a simile. And in the simile, every noun is indefinite. Yeah, it ran away like a pale Victorian watercolour. It doesn't matter which one. We're not being specific about which pale Victorian watercolour, but it's just an imaginary pale Victorian watercolour that's being compared with the cream houses. So that the cream houses ran away like a pale Victorian watercolour. And now he goes into an indefinite description. A race in miniature motors. Yeah, this is still describing what's going on in Brighton, but it's less specific because of the a. I would say it's less definite because of the a. Yeah, it sounds to me more like he's describing a pale Victorian watercolour of Brighton. Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me because he's used the a. Yeah, so the cream houses ran away into the west like a pale Victorian watercolour. And now he goes on to describe that watercolour. A race in miniature motors. Yeah, in Brighton they must do what they do in my town, which is the tourists, sometimes it's tourists, sometimes it's locals, but they will often go down to the seaside to show off their cars and have some kind of car meet or car race. They'll even have a race. There'll often be music coming out of the cars as well. So a race in miniature motors, a band playing. Yeah, it sounds to me like we're still describing a pale Victorian watercolour. A race in miniature motors, a band playing, flower gardens in bloom below the front. Now this is plural, but there's no article at all, which means it's indefinite. Yeah, when you use plural nouns without an article, they're indefinite, just like putting an a in front of a singular noun. Yeah, if you see a plural noun with a the before them, it's definite. Yeah, the men, I don't know, the men who I work for, something like that. Maybe you've got many bosses. But if you just say men drive faster than women, that's indefinite men, indefinite women. And here we've got indefinite flower gardens in bloom below the front. Now that's definite because we mean the seaside, and you know, front can be just the opposite of back. But when we say the front, we mean the seafront, the seaside, and so there's only one seaside, so that needs a the. Okay, and then we've got an a again, or an. Yeah.